Good evening, everyone. I'm Ellen Reckow, one of the co-leaders of the CI or Citizen Initiative Study Team. For the past year, our study team has been reviewing whether CI makes sense for North Carolina, and if yes, how should we move forward? After evaluating the pros and cons of CI, the team decided CI is an important direct democracy tool greatly needed in North Carolina. Then we reviewed League of Women Voters CI positions across the country and decided that the Alabama League of Women Voters position is the best fit for us. In late February, we received great news that the state board and the state program committee for League of Women Voters NC had approved our proposed CI position to be on the agenda for a vote to add it to our official platform. With this meeting and two planned caucuses at the convention, we are continuing to do outreach so that people will be informed as to what the proposal is when they vote on Sunday morning at convention for those people who are going. I will now introduce three other study team members who will present an overview for you. First, we'll have Jennifer Bremer, a co-leader of the team, who will provide background on CI and why it's so important for North Carolina now. Terry Landers, a study team member, will present the reasons why we picked the Alabama position. And Gay Williams, another co-leader of the team, will moderate the questions and answers. We really want this meeting to be interactive. You can put your questions in the chat as you think of them. If you feel as someone's presenting that it brings up a question in your mind, you're welcome to put it in the chat or else jot it down. And there will be time, ample time to cover all questions. You can ask them orally or Gay will be getting them off of the chat. And with that, Jennifer, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much. This is supposed to be, I think I'm starting on the next slide from here though. So why do we think that we need citizen initiative here in North Carolina? Well, currently, as I'm sure you guys all know, all laws and constitutional amendments must go through the North Carolina state legislature. But what if they're gridlocked? This has been known to happen, or non-responsive. North Carolina voters currently have no recourse. But with citizen initiative, voters can take issues directly to the voters across the state. Next slide, please. So how does CI actually work as a practical matter? Well, as I say, it often begins when the legislature is not able or is not responding to something the voters would like to see happen. And the first step is to get permission to formulate a proposal and get permission to reach out to the voters. And that kind of thing is the kind of detail that it's really critical to have a good position on this and to have guardrails and so forth as part of that. Then once it's approved, once you've collected the required number of signatures and they've been verified, then the initiative is submitted to the voters, typically in the general election, which of course is the election with the largest number of voters participating. And then if it passes, typically by a majority, but that depends from state to state, then that's it. It is officially enacted as a law or a constitutional amendment, or both in some cases. Next. So in 2024, and talk a little bit about how this is actually being used across the country, voters can only really consider what the legislature wants us to consider now, but as was mentioned, about half of the states have some kind of an initiative process. And in 2024, all those issues you see over there on the left-hand side, many of which I know are of great concern to or interest to league members, such as ranked choice voting or an independent redistricting commission, top four primaries, reproductive rights. Pretty much any issue can be brought forward by the voters. About half of the states have some kind of an initiative process. And all of these topics were addressed just in 2024. It's a very flexible procedure. Next. So how did they do? Well, there were altogether 159 ballot measures, not in any one state, thankfully, but spread across 41 states. And of those, there were 57 measures that were brought forward, citizen-initiated measures, and they not quite half, but 47% of them, 27 measures in total, were passed, and 53% of them, about half again, were not passed. So it is something that can be very effective in getting change, and it has proven that for more than 100 years now. Okay, next slide. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Terry, who is going to go into the position that we're recommending from Alabama in more detail. Take it away, Ms. Landers.
Hi. Well, now you've heard a little bit about CI, what it is and why we need it in North Carolina. So how do we get it in North Carolina? Well, we need a constitutional amendment. And as a league, we would like to work to enable CI by working towards a constitutional amendment. But in order to do so, we do need to have a position in place. And that is what we're hoping to do at the convention shortly. So the position that we are hoping to get in place really provides the framework for what we would like to see in a constitutional amendment that would enable CI. Please go to the next slide. So why did we choose Alabama? Well, CI is a very powerful tool, and it can be used by a special interest group. So you really need to make sure that the right structure is in place. And Alabama was the only position that explicitly addressed the critical need to protect representative and deliberative democracy. We felt that Alabama did the best job in specifying standards, guardrails, and guidelines in enough detail so that it would make a constitutional amendment that would be good as a standard for CI. Now, details need to be there. On the other hand, you want enough to make sure that you're covering all of the holes and all of the problems. But on the other hand, you don't want it so detailed that you're hamstrung, that you can't have a good set of communications and debates with other organizations or the legislature themselves in trying to put together this constitutional amendment. The Alabama position addresses all three aspects of citizens' initiative. The portion where you're putting together the initiative, the portion where you're getting enough signatures to get the initiative on the ballot, and the portion where you are educating your voters and campaigning for their vote. So let's go on to the next slide and we'll talk about all three of these stages. Okay, so preparation of the initiative. The position provides various sets of guidance here. Number one, it requires that there be an independent third-party review of the title of the initiative, the wording of the initiative, to make sure that it is clear and understandable, so that you know if you vote yes, you want it, what that means. How many times have we seen something on the ballot that was so confusing? If you voted yes, you really weren't sure what you were going to get. This makes sure that you want to have it clear and understandable. Likewise, with the independent review, making sure that whatever the initiative is, it's still protecting our constitutional rights, that they're not abrogated. This position also limits every initiative to one single subject. Now, that's important because we have seen it so many times where a popular legislative bill will be ready to be approved by a large number of bipartisan legislators, And then they start seeing all kinds of small, independent amendments added to it that have nothing to do with the main topic. We don't want to see this happen. We don't want ride-along initiatives added onto an initiative. And so if the initiative is required to be limited to one single subject, it avoids the ride-along process. Transparency. Transparency is something that everybody always says is a good thing. Well, this position gets a little bit more in specifics about what it means at each stage of a citizens initiative. When the citizens initiative is being prepared, it requires that there are financial disclosures from all of the sponsors. And this position also prohibits refiling of a failed initiative for 2 years. And this is there to prevent wearing people down by just continually putting the same thing out there year after year after year when it's always voted down, because that sometimes people just get tired and then it ends up passing, and you don't want that kind of a thing to happen. So you must take a break if it fails before you refile it again. Okay, let's go to the next slide, which will talk about the next stage. When you are collecting signatures, what are the guidelines we'd like to have in the constitutional amendment? Well, number one, it needs to provide a reasonable time for collection. Well, what does this mean? If you have no specifics in there to guide this, somebody could come up with a very short period of time for collecting signatures, which would mean you'd never be able to get enough signatures, and therefore you'd never get anything on the ballot. This obviously would mean CI would be useless in that kind of situation. So this position says you must have a reasonable time for collection, but it doesn't get so specific to say at this point exactly what that amount of time is. That's left for the negotiations of the constitutional amendment itself. The position requires that all signatures are from registered voters, and it also requires that they come from a geographical distribution across the entire state. Again, you want to make sure that any initiatives that are out there are ones that are really widely applicable. You want to avoid a special interest kind of situation where someone can get all of their friends in one localized part of the state to sign on, and you can get something that may not be good across the entire state. It doesn't specify exactly what that means. So for instance, when you put together the constitutional amendment, it might say that it's some specific percentage of registered voters out of every county that would have to sign on, but that level is not specified in the position. It gives us more flexibility. Here we're back to transparency again. Transparency at the collection of signatures stage is that financial disclosure from all organizations who are out there collecting signatures and lecturing to voters why they should be signing on to this. All of those need to be disclosed and available publicly. So the position also requires that the minimum number of signatures in order to get an initiative on the ballot is based on some well-established criteria. Now, the criteria is some percentage of the prior gubernatorial election. Again, it doesn't go to the level of specifying what percentage that is. That is left for the future after the negotiations for putting together the constitutional amendment. But it does specify that it should be based on the prior gubernatorial election. If that was left open and it could be any election, then somebody might want to hook it on to a very small election, either a primary or an election that was a local election. And therefore, if you did that, then it would not take very many signatures to get it on the ballot, and therefore it may not be widely applicable. So all of this is to make sure that the initiatives that do get on the ballot are applicable in a wide variety across our state. And lastly, as I think Jennifer mentioned, the signatures need to be validated before the initiative appears on the ballot. And what does this mean? Whatever the requirements for signatures are, if it's so many from signatures from each county, or if it is from only voters, whatever all of the different requirements are, those should be validated before it goes on the ballot. You don't want the initiative to be voted on and then to have somebody review the signatures and decide, oh, well, it shouldn't have been on there in the first place. We've seen too much of this already. So this is all an attempt to make sure everything is as neat and clean as possible. Okay, let's go to the next slide, which is the final stage of citizens' initiatives. It's when somebody's out there campaigning, letting people know what's going to be on the ballot, why it's good, and trying to get people to vote for it. This position requires that there be an impartial analysis of the consequences of the initiative, whether it be financial, whether it be legal, whether it be constitutional. This analysis needs to occur, and it needs to be communicated to the voters so that when they go to vote, they know the impact of it. Again, this will only show up on a general election ballot because that's when more voters are out. You want to have more voters having their eyes on the initiative and putting their votes for or against it. Laws require only a simple majority according to this position, but it does require that if it's a constitutional amendment, you need more than a majority of voters to approve of it. It doesn't state how many more. Again, that's the flexibility for when we put together a constitutional amendment, but it does require that and take into consideration that constitutional amendments are much more serious and therefore should, in fact, be supported by a larger percentage of the voting public. And finally, the legislature may see that there is an initiative out there that looks like maybe it's very popular, and they have the ability to turn around and pass a law that's exactly the same thing as the initiative, and therefore the initiative does not need to be on the next ballot. But if the legislature made any changes whatsoever, if they made any modifications or amendments, then this position states that both the original initiative as well as the modified one as passed by the legislature would both be on the next ballot, and it would be up to the citizens to choose which one really was enacted into law. Okay, so we now have a quick overview of why we chose the Alabama position to use as our guidelines for what we think should be in a constitutional amendment that enables CI. So I'm going to hand this back to Gay now, and we can go into our questions and discussion period, and Gay will facilitate that.
Thank you, Terry, and thanks everyone for the overview. And that is a very brief overview. That was only about 15 minutes. So if you hopefully knew a little bit about citizen initiative prior, but if not, that would give you